Hello, nerds for Yang.
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds! Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds! So nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello,
Now with this campaign, bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll with the YangGang.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds!
I've got Ryan Blevins, candidate for Congress, on the show today. Welcome to the show, Ryan. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's nice to be here. I've seen some of your stuff before, and it's good to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you. Obviously, a lot of us in the YangGang are still licking our wounds from New Hampshire. Was that a shock to you, or were you kind of maybe seeing the writing on the wall, or how did you handle that?
I was pretty shocked that he dropped out because I donated to him the day before he dropped out, and I was sure he was going to stay in at least until Super Tuesday. But after he dropped out, I saw a massive spike in viewership to my campaign and the other congressional candidates that are in the UBI caucus. We went from like 60 followers to like 2,000 followers on the official UBI caucus channel, Twitter account in less than a week, which is pretty amazing growth.
Yeah, that's incredible. So it was basically the YangGang was not ready to kind of suspend its activities and was looking for other outlets to push the movement if the presidential campaign was not going to be the focus. And sounds like you guys, and you had set up that UBI. You were one of the sort of original founders of the UBI caucus. Is that right?
Yes, I founded the caucus on October 27th, which is a date that many people might be familiar with, as that was the day of the UBI march that was followed by the Andrew Yang rally in San Francisco. And I was at that rally, and I met 2 or 3 other candidates that also supported UBI there. And then during his speech, Andrew Yang said that that the people that are in Washington now are not leaders, they are followers. And then as I was driving home, I was thinking about all of these other candidates that I met earlier in the day. And I was thinking, why don't we work together? You know, if you have supporters in that are not in your district, that's not really helping you. And if I have supporters that are not in my district, that's not really helping me. So let's build a network, and let's have like a unified section where our supporters can go find these other candidates that have similar ideas that might live in their district.
That's great. So how many UBI congressional candidates are there right now?
I think there are 29 for the House of Representatives, and there are 4 for the Senate.
Wow. And what is the Twitter handle for the UBI? Is it at UBI Caucus, or is it?
Yes, it is at UBI Caucus, and we are trying to use the hashtag UBI Caucus and the hashtag Vote UBI.
All right, let me just make everyone aware of that. Hold on. So that is, and when did you get that going, Ryan?
On October 27th.
So you started it on that day. That wasn't when you had the ideas. Like, no, look, right away you made it happen.
I think the first 2 people I invited were James Ellers from California 8th District and Jonathan Munitz from New Jersey. He didn't see a vision towards winning.
So what was the response? I mean, what have people has it been basically people were already for basic income and then joined the caucus, or have there been people who were running for Congress who said, oh, actually, I hadn't thought about basic income, but I agree with it now, and then have kind of converted over? Or is it mostly existing UBI people kind of joining forces?
It's mostly existing supporters that
Mhm.
I just met through Twitter or some other exchanges. Although we have had some people from the YangGang that were like, "Oh, I don't have a UBI caucus member in my district, and nobody is supporting UBI here. So I am going to run for Congress, and I will represent the humanity first ideas that Andrew Yang supports." And then they would join the caucus, and they would bring UBI to their district.
So Ryan, someone in the chat was asking what counties are in your district that you're running?
I am in California's 10th district.
Mhm.
The largest city is Modesto, California, and the second largest is Tracy, California. And it's mostly farmland.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And when did you decide to run? Was it also around that big rally, or was it beforehand? You already knew you were gonna go for it.
I started running at the beginning of October.
Mhm.
I was driving down I-5 at 2 in the morning. I was super tired, and I was thinking it would be very nice if I could change the laws to drive faster. And I was also listening to like Andrew Yang and Bernie Sanders like pretty much every day,
Mhm.
and was really starting to agree with Andrew Yang's ideas. But I didn't see a lot of support for him from the congressional side. So I
Mhm.
was, I'm gonna run.
And what was that? So that was a moment in the car. And did you have to consult with friends and family before you pulled the trigger, or was it like you knew 1,000% you're going to do it that minute?
Well, I didn't know I was gonna do it that minute.
Uh-huh.
I actually decided to run until like maybe 2 weeks later, but that was the moment that started it all. And then I started my Twitter account. I don't remember what it was called, but it was like anonymous representative or something,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't put my name on there, and I was just kind of putting my ideas out there and seeing how people would respond to see if
Mm.
there's something I wanted to do. And then I was getting really good responses. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try to represent these people.
And now if people want to learn more about you, you're at Blevins 2020.
Yeah, that's my Twitter account. And I also have Blevins campaign, blevinsforcongress.com, which has some of my policy ideas, but I haven't updated it for a few months. Some of my ideas have been changing over time, because I've noticed that people will give me surveys to fill out, and some of them will ask really hard questions,
Mm.
and just over time, my opinions have been changing.
Yeah, what would be an example of something where you thought you had your perspective, and then as a result of this process and more reflection and research, your position has evolved?
Well, when I first heard of the federal jobs guarantee by Bernie Sanders,
Mm-hmm.
I thought like a really good idea. But the more I think about it, the more I dislike it because of the word guarantee. I support expanding federal jobs, but I don't like the idea of a guarantee, because it puts an idea into people's minds that may not be realistic, or it could also create jobs that
Aren't needed.
productive. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
there's a story, I think it's from China, of people digging ditches with shovels, and someone
Mm-hmm.
said, "Why don't you use a spoon?"
Yeah. That's it's an interesting conundrum, and certainly, obviously, as a member of the YangGang, I'm probably more in favor of distributing cash into people's pockets than making up jobs for them. What are your thoughts on how much of the Humanity First campaign are you adopting, and are there parts of it where you're like, well, I actually disagree with Andrew on this, or I'm really focused on these 2 or 3 things, not all 150 or so policies on the Yang 2020 site?
So there are three policies that I'm really focused on, maybe four.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is the freedom dividend UBI, because that will fix almost all of our issues all at once. The second one is ending the wars. We've been in war since 2001, and our enemies control more territory now than they did in 2001. And the third one was well, I change it sometimes. Sometimes I say it's healthcare, and sometimes I say it's climate change, because there's a scientist on YouTube named Paul Beckwith. Some people call him a little bit alarmist, but he's got a master's degree and he teaches a class in Canada. So how radical could he be, right?
Yeah, and he talks about the imminent challenges of climate change, I'm guessing, and how we need to do way more sooner. Is that his general view, or what? Why do people think that he's not with the mainstream?
People call him a little bit of an alarmist because he's always like, we have to do something now or it's going to be too late. He often points toward the melting of the ice in the Arctic and the blue ocean events, as well as like the changing of the jet streams that will ruin a lot of our crops in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, it's I actually work with some Australians, and a lot of them who used to be climate change sort of skeptics are now saying like, well, maybe there is something to this. It's starting to go from the academic to the right here, right now kind of mode. So I'm not familiar with that particular individual that you mentioned, but certainly glad that more and more people are trying to treat this with a sense of urgency. I noticed you didn't mention democracy dollars. Is that not something you are supportive of, or?
Democracy dollars are very important. I think I would even more like public financing of elections. When you give democracy dollars, there may be someone that you like or support, but you don't know about them yet. Like Andrew Yang was pretty much an unknown candidate, which gave him a very unfair advantage. Right?
Yeah. So you have to be known to receive these democracy dollars.
Yeah.
And so how would you prefer public financing of elections to work?
I think it should just be something where you sign up and you get like some amount, like a predetermined amount. Like say you want to run for Congress, so the United States government will give you, 50,000 or so to run your campaign on, or 100,000 or whatever, and you're not allowed to accept donations anymore.
I see.
It would give everyone an equal playing field, and then if you want to run for president, they'll give you more, say like $2 million, so that you can run a campaign.
And then would you be worried about like just sort of too many people running and not taking it seriously, and just because they can kind of thing? Like, how do you make sure that the candidates that are running are putting skin in the game?
I'm not sure. That's something that we'll have to figure out, but I think it's a move in the right direction.
And what's the campaign been like locally for you? How are you finding people's receiving your message and your campaign, and what are you seeing on the ground there?
Well, I helped out with the Modesto YangGang occasionally, and I would set up like tabling events for them, and we would talk to people, and they would be like, "Who's Andrew Yang? Who's Ryan Blevins? I've never heard of these people before." And sometimes they would leave with a business card, and they were very happy to hear about some of the ideas that we were putting forward.
Well, of all of the ideas that you're advocating, is there one that you find is the best way to open the conversation and get someone to listen, or is it a variety of them?
My top two, the universal basic income and the ending the wars, are both extremely popular, and pretty much everyone is either into the idea.
And what's the sort of competitive field like? I'm guessing other people running for Congress in your district are also in favor of no more endless wars, or are you hearing is that a debate going on in your district right now, where there are some that are more aggressive on or more hawkish?
So we are there are 6 candidates in my district. 3 of them are very in favor of Trump. You know, they're the Make American crowd. And then we have the incumbent, who's more of an establishment dim. He kind of reminds me of Pete Buttigieg. And then there is another candidate that supports Bernie Sanders, and he's to the left of me on many issues. He's even to the left of Bernie on a lot of issues. For example, he wants to take away all.
Yeah. Okay. So, and when you said one of them the incumbent reminds you of Pete Buttigieg, in what way? Like, what is it about this candidate that kind of has similarities to Buttigieg?
Well, you remember how there was trending on Twitter recently? There was like repeats or something, because Pete was copying Andrew Yang.
Yes.
I've noticed that, but he doesn't really do anything about it, right? So Harder sometimes says that he will support something, but he doesn't really support it. So like, he co-sponsored Medicare for All, but I don't know if he's really fighting for it. And he's also, I've heard that he's voted to cut the Affordable Care Act funding, and he's also increased the funding for our military.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's part of the challenge, where sometimes people running, or in this case, incumbents, will just say they're for something, but in reality, that's not really doesn't line up maybe with their voting record or their specific policy proposals, but they'll just kind of draft off of a popular meme, if you will. And so how do you deal with that? Like, how do you sort of get people to dig deeper?
Well, we had a debate about a month ago, and I brought up his vote for the military budget, and I heard a lot of whispers from the crowd, which was very encouraging.
Oh. So what did you? So how did you frame your challenge? Like, what did you say?
Well, they just gave us a question like, why as a Democrat are you running against the incumbent Democrat? And I gave that answer of, well, he voted to increase the military budget by like $50 billion. And then my other Democratic opponent said something like he had some mysterious fundraising. And that was our 2 answers. And
then the whispering began.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Like, do you have a sense based on, I don't know if they're doing polls at the district level or by like crowd size or fundraising, like what do you think your chances are right now?
Well, the crowd size is definitely the largest on his side, but I'm not sure a lot of them are coming from our district, because when you look at Twitter and stuff, there are events that are hosted by the San Francisco party for his campaign, and only 5% of his funding comes from within our district, which is kind of crazy, because like, when you want to donate to a candidate, you'd probably donate to someone that lives close to you, right? But we're seeing his donations come from other sources.
Yeah, so I guess you're alluding to this notion that there is sometimes like the party's preferred candidate, and obviously, in fairness to the
He is
party,
definitely,
yeah,
yeah, he's
they're
definitely the preferred candidate.
if
Sorry,
they
my phone's
haven't.
dying, so I need that charger.
Oh, you're at 1%. Hopefully, we'll be
It's like
able to keep you.
it's okay. I made it to the charger.
Yay! Ryan Blevins, the man, can get it done. So it sounds like the party is going to kind of close ranks and protect the people, quote unquote, on the team that are already in office. And so, what are you going to do to turn that around? Like, do you have any? Have you found any approaches to be effective at kind of beating the odds?
Well, I have mentioned that I am considering leaving the Democratic Party because they are notoriously corrupt. My opponent has raised about $12 million over the past 3 years, while my other Democratic opponent has raised zero, and I've raised only about 5,000. And we've saw what happened in the Iowa caucus, where Pete Buttigieg got he outperformed the polls very significantly.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the data, almost all of the districts had something suspicious going on in the voting counts.
Interesting. So you're not sure that if you don't get I guess it sounds like if you don't get the Democratic nomination for this district, that you're not sure you'll just hang it up. You may run as a independent, or are you saying you might even do it before this primaries has been decided?
Well, the Democratic Party locks you in pretty significantly because they have apps like ActBlue, which we use for donations, and they reject independent candidates as well as Republican candidates. So they kind of lock you into the party, and you can't really escape. But after the election, I would have more freedom to change parties. One party that I am interested in is the California National Party, which stands for a lot of the Humanity First policies. They also support secession, which I don't really support, but a lot of their ideas are very good.
It's interesting that you mentioned the lock-in effect. This is very, a lot of people say in business there are these quote unquote like ecosystems where, well, if you buy a iPhone, then you're gonna probably get an Apple TV, and then you're gonna get like the Apple smart home stuff, and then there's no way you're gonna switch to Android or Microsoft or whatever. I guess I never thought that I never thought that the Democratic Party also has things like that, probably like email addresses and targeting and all this stuff that makes it very difficult for you to leave that mothership. It's kind of like you're either with them or against them.
That's how the two-party system works.
So what are your thoughts? Are you thinking that and why would you go California National? Have you thought about are there other third parties that you would think about, or why that one?
Well, I registered as that party in 2017 when I was mad at the 2016 election. But there's also a Humanity First party or a Humanity Forward party or something that people are trying to found. I haven't looked into it a lot, but that might be something that I'm interested in as well as some of the other independent parties. The UBI caucus has a lot of independent candidates, so there's a lot of different opinions of independent party is the best one.
Yeah, and speaking of the UBI caucus, like that's a really interesting combination of or intersection of different individuals. Are there how do you decide who is kind of allowed in the UBI caucus? Is it, let's say you support UBI, but you're pro, like, very interventionist foreign policy and more military interventions. Is that okay? Or like how do you decide who's in the UBI caucus? And what if they're just for a small basic income or a means tested basic income? Like, how do you figure that out?
Well, we just have a member pledge, which has something like, will you vote in UBI in 2021? And then if they say yes, then they can fill out a survey and become a member of the UBI caucus. And that's the only thing that we use to determine in the caucus. Different ideas about how to pay for it. And there's a lot of different approaches that people have. But all of us agree that UBI is going to be necessary for the future.
And when you talk about UBI with folks on the ground, how do they respond? It's interesting. It sounds like you've got some agricultural voters. I'm curious how they think about it and what their reaction is.
Well, my district is a purple district, so there's a lot of Republicans and a lot of Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the most common is, well, that's socialism.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also the Trump supporters that said, they're against socialism, but then when they receive reparations for the trade war, they're like, oh yeah, give me the money.
Yeah, it's not socialism when you get it. I suppose you can always convince yourself that whatever you're getting from I had this conversation with some members of my family are in the MAGA camp, and a particular member of my family said, oh yeah, I'm against socialism. And I said, well, frankly, I said, Mom, you get Social Security. And she said, yeah, but I paid into it. And then I said, what if I told you that most people who receive Social Security are drawing more from it than they actually contributed? So it is a redistribution from one generation to the next. And she was just unwilling to acknowledge that it's possible that she could be drawing more out of it than she put in. But I think the numbers reflect that it wasn't really designed for people to be taking out of it for like 3 decades. But on the other hand, like, she's very quick to be anti-socialism. I'm guessing that's not a shock to you that you sort of encounter some of that resistance as well.
Social Security is a form of universal basic income at the age of 65 or 67. And I think we need to drop that down to the age of 18 so that all people can benefit. Another sort of program is the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is only available for people under 25. That restriction is completely useless. Like, why do I have to be over 25 if I'm working?
Yeah, there's a number of things that we kind of already do, I guess. Like, in your earlier statement about Social Security, I guess you could rebrand UBI as Social Security for All. In that regard,
I might have made the hashtag Social Security for All once.
There you go. So, Ryan, how are you managing? How much of your time is spent running for office? Are you doing it full time, or is this something you kind of do at nights and on the weekends? Like, how are you making that work personally?
Well, I still work full time Monday through Friday, so I only have time on the weekends, basically.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that's going to be enough to make it happen, or what's your game plan?
Well, I do as much online stuff as I can during the week, and during the weekend
Mhm.
I will go in person to my district, and I will go, put up signs or whatever the campaign. On going to Sacramento to have an interview with KCRA 3, which is one of the biggest news stations. So that's a big win, I think.
Yeah, congratulations. When is that interview happening?
Next week.
Next week. Well, we'll be for sure. Anybody that's interested in the Blevins campaign, make sure you look out for that. Ryan, tell me a little bit about what you are doing with the sort of funds that you have available, and then what you would do if you raised more. Like, how would you deploy that money?
Well, it's really late in the game right now because we're only 2 weeks away from the election. But what I'm
Mm-hmm.
using the money right now, I'm planning on using it for radio ads. So I'm just going to buy a bunch of 30-second spots, and I'm going to distribute it to as many people as possible so that when it comes election day, they will have some of my ideas on their mind as they cast their votes.
Got it. And are you still raising money, or have you already planned out everything up until election day?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, no worries. I know the Wi-Fi is a little choppy over there. Are you still raising money now, or are you all set for now till election day?
I am all set for now. I have done a soft deadline to phase out fundraising until the election, and then I will resume if I would. Because one of the things I said earlier was that I donated to Andrew Yang the day before he decided to drop out. He needed donations the day before the election because there's nothing I can really do with that fundraising.
Yeah, no, I think that says a lot about your campaign and the principles that you're running on. And I think that's a super ethical and transparent way to do it. So hats off to you for not raising and then turning the lights off the next day, because that is tough. I actually had that happen to me with a different candidate. And I think in the long run, like, I have to believe that candidates sometimes have to make these decisions, like they're kind of game day decisions. So it's not like they knew they were going to end their campaign and we're still raising money. But I think for you, it's admirable that you're saying, hey, like, let's see the outcome of the primary. And if I'm your candidate, then for sure I'll turn on the fundraising action. But between now and then, you don't want to take money and not know, if it's really going to be kind of making the impact that people want. And so, hats off to you for being upfront about that. Ryan, are there any other are there any other topics that you wanted to hit while we've got you on the show?
Yes. I would like to plug, there's a lot of really great interviews on the moving forward. I know I'm on your show right now, but
sure, no, talk about
it. They're trying to interview every UBI caucus member, and they've already interviewed like 10 of us maybe. So if you go over there, you can learn more about the policies of different people. I am on the ice. Rashad Lloyd from Maryland is on there. And then Daniel Ross from New York is on there. Zoltan Istvan from California, who's running for president, and the Republican Party is in there. And all of them give really great interviews on there. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, that moving forward pod is awesome, and it's great content and really goes into great detailed conversations. So I'm glad that that you're mentioning it, and I hope more people out there will subscribe to the Moving Forward pod if you aren't already on wherever you listen to podcasts. Well, Ryan, I think I'll just ask you one last question before we wrap up, and that is, if you were in Congress today, what would be your approach to winning over your new colleagues, given that UBI is a pretty new idea for a lot of them? And how would you try and make it a reality?
I would tell them that right now, over 60% of our constituents agree with the idea. Percent of Democrats support universal basic income, and I would try to levy the pressure of the voters onto my my coworkers in the in Congress to get them to pass this idea. And I would also point out that Thomas Paine, one of the founding fathers, was trying to get it passed in the 1700s. And I would also point the focus to Martin Luther King and Richard Nixon, who almost passed universal basic income in the 1970s.
Right on, Ryan. I find all of those facts to be super compelling as well. I hope you will be able to get to DC and convert some folks over to the cause. And I noticed there were a couple of questions, so I want to make sure if anybody in the audience has questions for you, they can type them in now. One that I noticed was from Alex P, who was curious, like, hey, well, what did you do before you decided to run, or what a little bit about your I guess background and pre-congressional candidate days?
I am a robotics engineer, and I do a lot of quality assurance and testing to make sure that the robots are performing well, both hardware and software wise, so that they can go to the end user and make really awesome computers for everyone to use.
Oh, so when Yang has been talking about improvements in automation and robotics and software, you are seeing it firsthand.
Yes.
And do you? So I'm guessing you agree. Do you think it's as big of a deal in terms of the impact on jobs as he says, or do you think maybe he's an alarmist about it, or what's your view?
Well, I have said that one of the reasons I had jumped into the race was because I wanted to prevent another Great Depression, which I'm pretty sure you can infer what that means.
Okay. Well, Ryan, thank you for coming on the show. And I think it's great to see so many folks out there in the YangGang, not only supporting the Humanity First kind of movement through, social media or volunteering for Andrew, but people like you putting yourself out there, and you're kind of like, let's admit it, you're charging up a hill with a lot of headwinds where the system is not going to make it easy for you, and even the party that many of us belong to is not going to really encourage new candidates. They've got their stable of horses that they're going to feed and give the best equipment to, and then there's the rest of us.
I went to a conference, or not a conference. I went to a meeting with the Democratic office, and they said we can't help you much because we're already helping the incumbent. James Ellers also faced a similar thing where the Democratic Party was hosting their meeting at his opponent's office. So he went to his opponent's office, and then security kicked him out of the building because he was his opponent, even though he was in the part of the same party.
Yeah. That's I wish I could say I'm surprised. It's just disappointing to hear. I mean, I would imagine the Democratic Party folks would say, "Hey, what we want to do is make sure we retain control of the House, and these incumbents have the best return on investment, and we don't want to take chances on new people." But it doesn't feel super Democratic with a small d, for sure, when you hear that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well,
Look, Ryan, hopefully people will follow you on Twitter, check out your policies on your website. If anyone is in your district, I'm hoping that they will support you. And thank you also, not just for running your own campaign, but organizing other candidates across the country and trying to facilitate more collaboration between candidates, because I imagine this is one of those things where if everybody's just on it for themselves, it will only have so much success. But if we can all work together across offline, online, all across the country, we can start turning the tide. And maybe, it'll start small, but that's how every great movement starts.
Yeah. I actually had someone contact me saying that they were interested in joining the caucus and running a campaign for 2022. So if any of the viewers out there are interested in this issue and are interested in running, they can just DM me on Twitter about them being interested in running, and I can help them get started. Or I can give them whatever advice that I can, because it's a very, very steep learning curve. Mm-hmm. So if I'm able to make it a little bit less steep, I'd be happy to.
Awesome. If you ever have you ever thought about making maybe after all of the dust settles, you could put together hey, here's 10 things I learned running for Congress as part of the UBI caucus and what you should know, if you want to do it in 2022. That would be awesome. And maybe we can have you back on the show and you can talk about some of those key lessons for everybody to hear.
That's actually a really good idea. I'll think about that.
All right, my friend. Well, with that, I think we're going to wrap it up for today. But everybody, please go check out Blevins 2020 on Twitter and blevinsforcongress.com. Best of luck to you, Ryan, on your campaign and everything you're doing for the Humanity First movement. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye, nerds. Do you want to say goodbye, nerds, to all the audience out there?
Goodbye, nerds.
Right on, Ryan. Thanks, buddy.